Jake had no idea that the world he knew was on the verge of crumbling beneath his feet. That evening had seemed so ordinary. He'd been invited to a surprise party celebrating a close friend's promotion. Emma, his wife, had left earlier to help set things up. She had a flair for dramatics and loved orchestrating grand surprises. So it didn't strike him as odd when she insisted he arrive later for a big entrance. He trusted her implicitly, never questioning her motives. He believed the night would unfold with joy and laughter. But the moment Jake stepped through the doorway of the house, something tugged at him. It wasn't a sound or a sight. It was a feeling, a quiet, nagging disturbance in the air, as though the house itself knew something he didn't. Everything on the surface seemed normal. The air buzzed with laughter and music. Glasses clinked, people smiled, friends mingled effortlessly in stylish attire. The mood should have been light and celebratory, but for Jake, there was a chill beneath the cheer. He scanned the room, searching instinctively for Emma. She was always easy to spot, the kind of woman who lit up a space with her presence. But tonight, she was nowhere. At first, he assumed she was busy behind the scenes, maybe checking last-minute details or preparing drinks. But as he weaved through the guests, greeting familiar faces and pretending to smile, a quiet panic began to rise. He checked the bar. She wasn't there. He peeked down the hallway. Nothing. A quick glance at the back patio, the kitchen, even the corners of the crowded living room. Still no Emma. His unease deepened, like the steady tightening of a noose. Then, without warning, a woman he didn't recognize approached him. She was composed, yet something in her eyes betrayed the weight of what she carried. She didn't speak at first. Her lips trembled slightly, her breath shallow. Finally, she leaned in close, her voice barely audible over the hum of music and conversation. "You should check the guest room upstairs," she said, her tone as delicate and haunting as a whisper in a nightmare. Jake stared at her for a moment, unsure whether to dismiss her or obey the cryptic advice. But something in her gaze, a subtle, aching honesty, compelled him. He turned without a word and made his way toward the stairs, each step heavier than the last. His heart thundered in his chest, not with fear, but with a dreadful certainty that whatever waited on the other side of that door would change everything. He stood before the guest room, hand trembling on the knob. He drew a deep, slow breath in a futile attempt to steady himself. Then he pushed the door open. The world shattered in an instant. Time seemed to freeze, the air thick with disbelief. There, bathed in the soft glow of the bedside lamp, was Emma, his wife, locked in a tender, unmistakably intimate embrace with another man. Their bodies were close, their expressions flushed with guilt and horror the moment they noticed him. Jake couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The silence in the room was deafening. No words were exchanged. No screams, no explanations, no confrontation. Just a vacuum of betrayal. He looked at Emma as though she were a stranger, the woman who had vowed to love him, to be faithful, to choose him. She had torn their bond apart with a single decision. Without a sound, he turned and walked away. He exited the house, the laughter and music now distant echoes behind him. The cold night air slapped his skin, but it couldn't numb the pain blooming in his chest. His body moved on autopilot, while his mind replayed the scene over and over like a cruel, looping film. Emma's face, the other man's hands, the shared look of shame between them, burned into his memory like a scar. Later that night, Emma came home. Jake said nothing. He didn't yell. He didn't demand answers. The silence was far more powerful, far more condemning. He sat in the quiet of their shared home, while the weight of betrayal crushed the breath from his lungs. The woman he once called his heart had become a ghost haunting the shell of their marriage. The next morning, Emma was desperate to speak. Her voice shook as she asked him to listen. Reluctantly, he agreed, though every fiber of his being wanted to disappear. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table, a place once filled with warmth, now colder than ice. Emma's hands trembled as she reached for words. "I don't even know where to begin," she whispered. "But I have to try. I have to explain." Jake didn't respond. He picked up his coffee, took a slow sip, then slammed the mug down with a force that made her flinch. His eyes bore into her, emotionless yet devastatingly intense. Speak, he said coldly. But understand that nothing you say can change how I feel. Emma's words stumbled from her mouth. She said it was a mistake, a moment of weakness. She tried to frame it as confusion, as emotional distance, as fear of losing him. She insisted she still loved him, always had. Jake let out a bitter, hollow laugh. Love, he spat, eyes narrowing. You call that love? What you did to me, what you did to us, isn't love. If that's what love means to you, I want no part of it. Tears poured down Emma's cheeks. She tried to explain again, said she felt neglected, that she thought he didn't see her anymore. But her words felt empty, swallowed by the chasm that had opened between them. Jake stared at her as if searching for the woman he once knew, but she wasn't there, just someone he barely recognized now. The weight of her betrayal had twisted everything, poisoned every memory, every kiss, every promise. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a small part of him still searched for meaning, for clarity, for closure. Emma's voice broke again. Jake, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm begging you. Let's try. We can fix this. We can rebuild what we had. Jake stood abruptly, rage and sorrow twisting across his face. He turned away, then back again, his voice quaking with fury. What hurts me most, he said slowly, is how easily you lied. How easily you made me feel like I was the only one when you had already given yourself to someone else. Our marriage was built on trust, and now that's gone. What's left to save? She sobbed uncontrollably, her face in her hands, her entire body shuddering with the grief of what she destroyed. He watched her, felt the echo of their shared life slip further and further away. For a brief moment, something in Jake softened. He almost reached out, almost comforted her, but the weight of betrayal surged back like a tidal wave. He couldn't forget. He couldn't forgive. Not yet. He leaned forward, his voice now low and almost mournful. I don't even know what I feel anymore. I don't know if it's love or anger or just emptiness. But I do know one thing. I don't trust you. And without trust, there's nothing left to fight for. Emma's tears were quieter now, her face pale, her posture defeated. She had no defense, no argument strong enough to change what she'd done. Jake turned and left the room, his footsteps heavy. At the door, he paused and looked back one last time. Give me time, he said, but don't expect a miracle. And with that, he was gone. The days that followed blurred into one another. Jake lived in a fog, mechanical and numb. Friends checked in. Family offered support. But no one could touch the wound inside him. The pain wasn't loud anymore. It was quiet, constant, and exhausting. A dull ache in his bones that refused to let him forget. Weeks passed. The house grew quieter. Emma moved out. The divorce finalized with painful civility. Jake stayed, not because it felt like home, but because it was familiar. The silence of the walls was crushing, filled with memories that cut like glass. Still, he endured it. He tried to reclaim some part of himself. He went out again. He smiled in public. He even laughed, though the sound felt foreign to his own ears. But when night came, when the world went still, her face returned. The image of that night, her betrayal, the cold finality of her goodbye. One morning, Jake stood before the mirror. The man staring back at him was changed, older somehow, hardened by heartbreak. His eyes were no longer filled with warmth, but with weary defiance. He had been broken, yes, but he was still standing. I can't do this to myself anymore, he said aloud, a whisper of truth finally given voice. I can't let her mistake define me. That day, he asked Emma to meet again. One final conversation. They sat once more at the same kitchen table, though now the air between them was still, resigned. Jake's voice was steady this time. Not cold, not cruel, but certain. Emma, he said quietly, I've thought about this for so long. About us. About everything. And I've come to a decision. I can't stay in a marriage built on broken trust. I'm not angry anymore, but I know I can't live in the shadow of this pain. Emma nodded slowly, her face crumpling as tears welled once more. I understand, she whispered. I lost you the moment I betrayed you. Jake's heart ached, but he knew it was right. I wish it were different, he said. But this is how it has to be. I hope you find peace. I hope we both do. And with that, it ended. Months later, Jake walked alone on a quiet path, the sun setting softly around him. The pain still lived in him, like an old scar, but it no longer controlled him. He paused, closed his eyes, and murmured into the silence. Life goes on, and so will I. It wasn't the life he planned, but it was his. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to begin again.